Hey everyone, welcome to Summer Sampler 2019. I'm Jen Carlton Bailey, and the next block is Cul-de-sac. It's right behind me here. When I first made this block, it was inspired by being a little kid and being in Salt Lake City, Utah, going all over the cul-de-sacs. We'd go from house to house, and some houses had great popsicles, some houses had great chips. So we based our day on food, and we'd go in the cul-de-sac behind everyone's yards. We'd go into the houses, we'd go back around. So this is a reminiscent block of the summer for me. Now, before we get started on how to make this block, I wanted to show you my tips and tricks, or rather tools that I use to set myself up for success. Okay, so I'm gonna move the camera just down a bit so you can see. There we go. Okay, so here, these are my favorite things. I'm gonna start first with thread. This is a new thread to me. It's one that I've really enjoyed using. It's Sulky Poly-Lite 60 weight. I'm not sure if that will focus on that. I'll have a picture and everything written out for you. But this thread works so good in my Juki 2010. It goes at a high speed and doesn't break, which is why I love this. And it's thin. You'll be surprised how much of a difference the weight of thread can make on your blocks, curved or not, especially in paper piecing. All right, so next would be Microtech Sharps 8012. Now, if you sew over pins, I won't judge you. But if you're doing it, you want to make sure that you use a really thin needle in your machine. Even a 70 would be good. But these, the 8012s, are great because they're sharp, don't leave a big hole, and they're nice and thin. Pins. I don't pin my curves, but I do pin my blocks together. And these Clover thin glass head pins are my very favorite because they go in so smooth and they're nice and thin again. Rotary blades. Now, I use a 28 millimeter, and this goes perfect in my curves, in my template sets. When you're going around these tiny little curves, you really need a 28 millimeter. I found that the 18 is too small and the 45 is too big, so this is perfect. I use Clover brand because I like how it feels in my hand. It's nice and thick. And it's also got a small little nut right here. Some of the other brands have a really big one that bump into my template. So this is definitely my favorite. Anyone's gonna work, but if you're looking to invest in one, this is my favorite. Next would be glue. Now I'm trying out a couple different glue sticks right now, and I'm going to report back. But for now, this is what I've been using for years. It's the same as the Fons and Porter and the Bowen, the French one, and this is Soline. So all the glues are interchangeable. This one currently has, I think it has the French Bowen one in yellow. Great tool. Next would be square up rulers. I really like these ones by Creative Grid. They've got some texture on the back, and they make it easier for my eye to read. So I'm finally all set with my Creative Grids. They're a little expensive, so I had to piecemeal them out and got a new one every month. And then the next thing you need is templates. And thank you for those of you who purchased the full set of templates with the discount. I really appreciate you supporting my one woman business. These are great. They're nice and thick. If you don't have them, don't worry. You're just going to copy and transfer the template to template plastic or cardboard. All right, and the final thing, this is a new to me board. One of my students had it in a class that I was teaching in the Midwest. What I like about it, this is my old one right here. This is a Skyhawk, and I'll still use this. But what I like about this one is the finger grooves. And I know that might sound a little silly, but when you're like in your groove sewing and cutting and you want to do something fast, this works really well. So I'm going to be using this today, and I'll let you know how I like it. All right. So for now, we're going to head over to the sewing machine area, and I'm going to show you how to cut out the block. Next, we're going to be cutting out our convex and our concave. This is our concave right here. You crawl into a cave. You could also call this your crust piece or your pie piece. So now this is real life for me. I usually, when I make quilts, grab from my scrap bin, and whatever color happens to be the right size is what I use. They're all cut strange, but that's okay because I like to use what I have. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got my spinning mat. I'm going to place my template right down here, line it up. You always want to make sure that you're on grain, meaning your template isn't like this. If my threads are running this way and this way, if I do it as I'm showing you now, there would be too much bias. We really want to make sure that we're using good practices and cutting things out on grain. So hold it down with my fingers. I've got my rotary blade. I cut with confidence. Cut with confidence. Don't be scared. Pull that piece away. Spin my mat without having to move my template, which is great. Spin it one more time and just get that little bit. When we take our template away, these are the pieces that are left. This I'm going to use for a scrap. Put it to the side. And by the way, I was cutting 2 layers at a time. For this block, that's all you'll need to do is 2 layers. But if you decide to do more with the convex piece, you can cut about 6 layers. And with the concave piece, you can only cut about 4. That's only with a fresh blade. So keep that part in mind. All right, so I've got my first curve cut. Now I'll move over to my concave piece. Now I need 2 6.5. So I'll go ahead and line my scrap piece of paper or fabric, hello, up. Line it up there. Now when I cut this, I typically will cut my ends first, just so I know I get a real good sharp cut. I'll hold one finger here and one finger down here on the 2 legs, making sure that my finger isn't sticking out. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm missing a little bit of my finger right there because I wasn't paying attention and I just nicked it off. I know, gross, but safety first, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we've got this. I'm going to, again, put my blade right up against my template and cut with confidence. Pull that away. And voila, we've got it. Oh, I didn't cut my sides. And you don't necessarily need to cut this part off because we're going to square the block up, but it's a good practice to get into, and it will help teach you, the more you do it, the better you'll get at cutting straight. And I know that sounds silly, but cutting straight is kind of hard, right? So here we go. I've got my first 2 cut out. I'm gonna speed it up and finish cutting out the rest, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to glue baste. Alrighty, I got all my curves cut out, got my 4 concave pieces cut out, and now I'm going to show you how I glue baste. You can do a couple different things. You can either use a seam roller, or I've got my little iron here. I'll show you how I do both. You can also just finger press. And what I'm talking about is the middle. I'm gonna take it and I'm going to do a little press right there. So now I've got a little tiny mark there, and that's gonna, again, set me up for success and help me match when I'm gluing. So I'm gonna do it with the iron on this one. I like to batch my tasks, meaning I do everything all together. So I cut all my curves out, I press all my seams. So I'll line up 100 of these on my iron, or on my ironing board just like this, and I'll take my little iron and I'll just hit that middle right there and get them all at once. And then I've got my crease. Batching a task saves time because you get into a rhythm. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move this over. So now that I've got that crease center, what I get to do is nest these two together. So one will go facing this way and the other one will just right there nest. It's just another safeguard to help you getting things done correctly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put some glue right in the center. With short strokes, see how the glue pen is on the outside of the curve? If I do it this way, what I find happens is I get too much glue onto my fabric. So I like to turn my block and I do the glue coming from the side and I do short strokes so I'm not pulling the bias fabric. And I only do one side at a time. Put my glue stick down, take my nesting crease, poke it right there. Just give it a little poke. Next, take the end and line it up with the edge of the pie shape side. Press that. Now, this is what it looks like. Kind of crazy, right? But if you take and put the side down, you can just simply smush the fabric in and it lays perfect, just like that. Next, we'll go to the other side. Short strokes of glue. I don't do dots, I like the strokes, just like that. Take my side, line it up real straight, give it a good poke. Now, the more you do this, the easier it will get, obviously, and you'll find your own way of getting your fabric to go down. You saw I just kind of laid my fingers down and glued it together, just like that. So let's do it one more time. Put this one to the side. Going to go ahead, kind of fold that fabric, give it a good press. This one's already pressed because I did it 2 at a time. From whatever, if you're left or right-handed, just as long as the glue stick is on this side of the fabric. Short strokes so I don't pull my bias. Take my centerpiece, nest it right in there, give it a good poke. Go to the side, give it another good poke. Sorry, my mat and my fabric is green. That's probably not the best. Get this laid out and bam, look at that. It's so quick, you guys. It will take practice, but keep trying. Okay, glue, 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 glue. Short strokes. That was not enough, so I went back to fill in. Line up my sides, turn it, and voila. Now I get a lot of questions about the glue and does it wash out? Yes, it's 100% water soluble. When you wash your quilt, this will be gone. Does it gum up your needle? No, you can sew instantly. I've been doing it this way for 3 years now and I've never had a problem with my needle. It will also stay together for a very long time. The longest my curves have been basted together is 5 years. I was working on a project only once a year and that's how it worked. And it's It's really phenomenal glue. If you're finding it's not sticking, you're not using enough. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I sew it at the machine, so I'll be right back. Now this is gonna get a little bit noisy because my machine is a little noisy. What I'm gonna do first is slide my block underneath. I'm in the habit of back stitching. You don't need to because we're at such a small thread length. So just do what feels all right to you. No, not necessary, but it's a habit. Now, I'm gonna place my hands here just so I can guide the fabric. My big thing is I want my feed dogs to work for me, so all I'm doing is guiding. I'm not pushing, I'm not pulling. I'm just simply guiding it along that seam guide, making sure nothing's in the way, get to my ends, and backstitch. There you go, there's a curve. Now, since we set ourselves up for success and we knew that this was good and there were no tucks or puckers, this side is gonna look great too. Now, let me show you how I sew in real time. I love my Juki, it goes so fast. Done. There's my curve. I love my machine. Now, let's go to the iron. I am not afraid of a little Best Press. I like Best Press. It's a starch alternative. I'll give it a couple sprays. I always start from the back, holding it lightly. I use the edge of my iron. Probably gonna be easier to do it this way, though I'm not left-handed. I just press my seam down, sets my seam at the same time, and I flip it over. Now this is an important part because sometimes you can over glue. And if you over glue, let me show you what it looks like. You'll come in and you'll press your curve and it's gonna be all pretty. And then you go to square it up and nothing matches. You're like, how am I supposed to square this block up? So the first thing I do if that happens is I go back and I check to see if I over glued. Do you see that? So here's, I think it looks pretty. It's nice and flat and pressed, but if I go here and see, there was something over glued. So if you're having problems with your blocks not squaring up properly, that's gonna be your reason. So again, I'm gonna use the edge of my iron, the edge, just to make sure I don't have any weird over gluing, and press nice and flat. There we go. Nice and flat. I'm gonna do this one real quick so I can show you squaring up twice, because squaring up can be a little bit of a challenge when you first get started, just because there's a few things that you have to keep in mind. All right. So we've got our two 6.5-inch squares. Now we're going to square it up. I'm gonna try and move this a little bit closer so you can see a little bit better when I'm squaring up. Here we've got our block. It's not quite 6.5, it's a little bit over, and that's because I built slop into my templates, meaning you can not cut right, you cannot sew right. Once you square it up, it's gonna be perfect. I found that that's my best method. So what I'm gonna do here is right on this white line, see this white line here on my ruler? That's my 1/4 inch mark. And I'm going to line it up with the outside, right here, the outside of my curved fabric, my green fabric. I'm gonna line this up first, then I'll go up here. I'll hold this so I don't lose it, and I'll pivot up a bit. So I've got a 1/4 inch from here to here on my ruler and a 1/4 inch from here to here on my ruler. Then I'll just go ahead and cut it. This is a really forgiving block. There we go. move my fabric out of the way, and we've got a perfectly squared 6.5 inch block. Put that to the side, and I'm going to do it again so you can see. Gonna line up that white one. On this ruler, there's a white one and there's a black one. The black one is right here. The white is here, so I use either based on what fabric. If I have a lighter fabric, I'll use the black. So 1/4 inch there, hold it, pivot that up to the 1/4 inch. Oh, good. I'm off a little bit. I have about a 1/16 of an inch that I'm losing right here, which is fine, because when we go to sew these blocks together, we're gonna sew at a full 1/4 inch. So that little bit is not going to matter. And if you are a perfectionist, I'm sorry. And I mean that with love, because it will drive you nuts. But it will be okay, I promise you. All right, there we go. Next, I'm gonna show you how to put the curve in. So this is a 6.5. Our next one that we're going to, excuse me, is a 5.5. So I've got my 5.5 curve right here, and I've got my 5.5 inch concave piece or crust, however you want to call it. Now I'm going to, this is an important part. This is the part that will have you have matching seams or not have matching seams. I'm gonna go ahead and square, I'm gonna just line my block up with some lines on my mat. I'm just gonna pick one and line it up. This is a trick that I figured out after I made a whole quilt like this, and none of them, well, not none of them, but a lot of them didn't line up. I found that whenever I put my concave piece down, I wouldn't get it straight. I would be like this. You can see that there's more fabric here than here, but when I look down on it, it looks straight to me. I don't know, maybe it's my astigmatism I have. So I've taught myself that if I get my block squared up, lay my 5.5 inch concave, and I find the line that matches. There, right here, and right here. So I'm lining my template up like this, lining up with the edge of the line, holding it, cut with confidence. I take that curve out. Next will be glue basting it in and sewing it. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Time for the next ring. It's 4.5, so I'll use the same method. I'll find a square here. I'll take my concave piece in 4.5, find my lines on my mat, make sure everything's square, cut it out. These are great scraps. I have a drawer of just random curved pieces that I can use as scraps. So don't throw those away. Those are absolutely usable. Let's do on the next one. Doing the big ones 2 at a time. Save a little time on that. Line up my concave piece on the block, line it up with my mat, and cut. So I've got 2 rings, I need 2 more. This is the next color that's going in. Since this was a 4.5, I'm putting a 4.5 in there. Same with this. Instead of sewing in between, I'm going to show you how you can also just cut all your rings at once. You just have to know what order to go in and what one to use. So this is, we're pretending like this is in my block, using the 3.5, which will go next. Can you tell it's a watermelon themed? Now, since I don't have the whole square to line up the block on my mat, I'm just gonna line up the 3 points right there, nice and square. Take my 3.5 inch, use the same method of lining it up, cut it out. So when I go to my sewing machine, I can sew all of these together at once. I still glue based, and I still sew with my concave piece on top. It just gets a little bit more. Let me go ahead and cut out this other red one, and I will show you how that works. 3.5. Now, just make sure that you're using the right piece on the right piece of fabric. Cut this out. Really makes a difference using the lines on your mat. All right, so now I'm ready to glue baste these together and sew them at my sewing machine. I'm gonna try and speed this up and finish the block in one fell swoop. Let's see how it works. How to get matching points. This was a trick that was taught to me from a friend in Canada. Her name is Sonia, and she did a lot of paper piecing. The first class I ever taught, she's like, let me show you how to match points. Thank you very much. But first, real quick, I've gone back to a full quarter inch on my sewing machine, and I'm back to a full 2.0 for my stitch length. The first thing I'm gonna do is set myself up, and I'm gonna do this trying to look at the camera. It might be hard, but see how they look good right there? They look like they're great. I'm gonna go ahead and hold that and take a pin and go in at an angle and just catch that seam. See where that is? Just catching the seam, I'm going in at an angle. What that prevents, see how nice and flat that is? If I would have gone in how I normally pin, which is down and then up, it can really distort. I don't know if you can see how that works. There's like a little U lump in there. It distorts where my seam is, and it shifts. I'm gonna do it again. Set up for success. Go in at an angle. And double check that it looks good. Yeah, I think that looks good. Go to the sewing machine. Pull my pin out if you don't want to sew over it. Readjust. And stitch down. Now, I've sewn over 7,000 curves, and I still get excited when I open it and it matches. I typically will look at it this way first and go, does it match there? And it does. Next, I'll press my seam open. I recently started doing that when I got a long arm, because I found that when I was going over nested seams, it would clunk, clunk, clunk over that seam. And someone's like, oh, just open your seams. So it's like, oh, duh, but I hate opening my seams. It takes too much time. And then, you know what? It saved me a lot. I'm gonna sew the rest of this block together, and then we'll match up the lines on the curve and curve. So we have our blocks all put together. We've got our hedge block and our curve block. Congratulations. Now we want all these seams to match up. So we're gonna do the little trick where flip it over and we're going to put our pins at a diagonal. Excuse me. Gonna first open it up, line them together. They look good. Hold that point, take my narrow pin and at an angle, going at an angle, I'm just gonna catch that seam right there. See how that is? That right there is gonna be a lifesaver when matching seams. Right, get me set up, pinch it. Sorry, I've got a little tickle in my throat. We have a bunch of cotton floating outside. So at an angle. So your pins are gonna look like that. We'll go ahead and do this last one. And then my final. Whoops. Now that we have it all pinned, let's go ahead and sew this block and hopefully be excited that our seams match. All right, moment of truth. And take my pins out. Is it gonna work? Ah, it totally worked. Look, matching seams that didn't slip. I'll go ahead and press this open, finish sewing my block, and we'll be all done. I just finished ironing the last seam in this block and I love it. It's all done. This is what the back seams look like. Some press to the side while the curves are all pressed in and all the other seams are open. I hope this was fun for you and that you picked up a new skill or two. Make sure to tag me, Betty Crocker-Ass or Jen Carlton Bailey on Instagram or Facebook. Let me know how it goes. I'll be in the Facebook group all week for any questions that you might have. See you later.